Good morning, philosophers, or at least entities that identify as philosopher appendage bearing beings. Woo. Yesterday, today, man, have really challenged my ability to keep with my habits, but for great reasons. Like, it's just been super productive. Okay, so let's get into it. Even though we're running a little late today, that's fine. And do we know what this is? Certainly. Whence have we acquired the knowledge of it? Is it not from the things we mentioned just now, from seeing sticks or stones or some other things that are equal we come to think of that other which is different from them? Or doesn't it seem to you to be different? Look at it also this way. Do not equal stones and sticks sometimes, while remaining the same, appear to one be is really weird phrasing. Okay. Look at it also this way. Do not equal stones and sticks sometimes, while remaining the same, appear to one to be equal and to another to be unequal? Certainly they do. What? I don't understand. But what of the equals themselves? Have they ever appeared unequal to you, or equality to be inequality? These are concepts. They can mean something totally detached from reality. The fact that a concept can exist doesn't mean it exists in reality. I think we talked about this yesterday. Never, Socrates. These equal things and the equal itself are therefore not the same? I do not think they are the same at all, Socrates. But it is definitely from the equal things, though they are different from that equal, that you have derived and grasped the knowledge of equality. Very true, Socrates. Very untrue, says Patrick. Whether it be like them or unlike them? Certainly. It makes no difference, as long as the sight of one thing makes you think of another, whether it be similar or dissimilar. This must of necessity be recollection? Quite so. Well then, he said, do we experience something like this in the case of equal sticks and the other equal objects we just mentioned? Do they seem to us to be equal in the same sense as what is equal itself? So this might be one of the first times we've really referenced like the Platonic form of something, and we're reading Plato, so I'm kind of surprised it took 65 pages of this book to get there. So like the perfect form, disembodied from reality, of equal, they're going to talk about as if it exists, and everything that actually exists is just like a poor shadow of the Platonic form, the perfect form of the thing. And so in this case, it looks like we're talking about the perfect form of equal, as if it exists somewhere outside reality, casting shadows of equality into our world. So that we, I guess probably through our, soul or something, can come to remember them. So like that's why they're saying like you don't learn new things, you just remember old things. Well, your soul remembers old things that it was familiar with from when it was in contact with the perfect realm where the perfect equal exists. I think that's where we're going. Is there some deficiency in their being, such as the equal, or is there not? A considerable deficiency, he said. Whenever someone, on seeing something, realizes that that which he now sees wants to be like some other reality, but falls short and cannot be like that other since it is inferior, do we agree that the one who thinks this must have prior knowledge of that to which he says it is like, but deficiently so? Necessarily. Well, do we also experience this about the equal objects and the equal itself, or do we not? Very definitely. We must then possess knowledge of the equal before that time when we first saw the equal objects, and realized that all these objects strive to be like the equal, but are deficient in this. That is so. Then surely we also agree that this conception of ours derives from seeing or touching or some other sense perception, and cannot come into our mind in any other way, for all these senses, I say, are the same. They are the same, Socrates, at any rate in respect to that which our argument wishes to make plain. Our sense perceptions must surely make us realize that all that we perceive through them is striving to reach that which is equal, but falls short of it. Or how do we express it? Like that. Then before we begin to see or hear or otherwise perceive, we must have possessed knowledge of the equal itself, if we were about to refer our sense perceptions of equal objects to it, and realized that all of them were eager to be like it, but were inferior. That follows from what has been said, Socrates. But we began to see and hear and otherwise perceive right after birth? Certainly. We must then have acquired the knowledge of the equal before this. Yes. It seems then that we must have possessed it before birth. It seems so. Therefore, if we had this knowledge, we knew before birth, and immediately after not only the equal, but the greater and the smaller, and all such things. For our present argument is no more about the equal than about the beautiful itself, the good itself, the just, the pious, and, as I say, about all those things which we mark with the seal of what it is, both when we are putting questions and answering them, So we must have acquired knowledge of all them before we were born. That is so. If, having acquired this knowledge in each case we have not forgotten it, we remain knowing and have knowledge throughout our life. For to know is to acquire knowledge, keep it, and not lose it. We do not call the losing of knowledge. Do we not call the losing of knowledge forgetting? Most certainly, Socrates, he said. But I think if we acquired this knowledge before birth, then lost it at birth, and then later by the use of our senses in connection with those objects we mentioned, we recovered the knowledge we had before. Would not what we call learning be the recovery of our own knowledge, and we are right to call this recollection? Certainly. It was seen to be possible for someone to see or hear or otherwise perceive something, and by this to be put in mind of something else which he had forgotten and which is related to it by similarity or difference. One of two things follows, as I say. Either we are born with the knowledge of it, and all of us know it throughout life, or those who later we say are learning are only recollecting, and learning would be recollection. That is certainly the case, Socrates. Which alternative do you choose, Simmias? That we are born with this knowledge, or that we recollect later the things of which we had knowledge previously? I have no means of choosing at the moment, Socrates. Well, can you make this choice? What is your opinion about it? A man who has knowledge would be able to give an account of what he knows, or would he not? He must certainly be able to do so, Socrates, he said. And do you think everybody can give an account of the things we were mentioning just now? I wish they could, said Simmias, but I'm afraid it is much more likely that by this time tomorrow there will be no one left who can do so adequately. So you do not think that everybody has knowledge of those things? No, indeed, said Simmias. So they recollect what they once learned? They must. When did our souls acquire the knowledge of them? Certainly not since we were born as men. Indeed, no. Before that, then? Yes. So then, Simmias, our souls also existed apart from the body before they took on human form, and they had intelligence. Unless we acquire the knowledge at the moment of birth, Socrates, for that time it is still left to us. Quite so, my friend. But at what other time do we lose it? We just now agreed that we are not born with that knowledge. Do we then lose it at the very time we acquire it? Or can you mention any other time? So this is our position. Let's see. I cannot, Socrates. I did not realize that I was talking nonsense. Everyone is talking nonsense right now. So this is our position, Simmias, he said. If those realities we are always talking about exist, the beautiful and the good, and all that kind of reality. And when I'm saying the beautiful and the good, I'm talking about like the perfect form of beautiful that exists out there somewhere. The beautiful and the good, and all that kind of reality sorry. This is some language that brain cells aren't used to reading. If those realities we are always talking about exist, the beautiful and the good and all that kind of reality, and we refer all the things we perceive to that reality, discovering that it existed before and is ours, and we compare these things with it, then, just as they exist, so our soul must exist before we are born. If these realities do not exist, then this argument is altogether futile. Is this the position that there is an equal necessity for those realities to exist, and for our souls to exist before we were born? If the former do not exist, neither do the latter? I do not think, Socrates, said Simmias, that there is any possible doubt that it is equally necessary for both to exist, and it is opportune that our argument comes to the conclusion that our soul exists before we are born, and equally so that reality of which you are now speaking. Nothing is so evident to me personally as that all such things must certainly exist, the beautiful, the good, and all those you mentioned just now. I also think that sufficient proof of this has been given. Then what about Cebes, said Socrates, for we must persuade Cebes also. It's easy to forget they're supposedly sitting in a prison cell right before they murder Socrates. He is sufficiently convinced, I think, said Simmias, though he is the most difficult of men to persuade by argument, but I believe him to be fully convinced that our soul existed before we were born. I do not think myself, however, that it has been proved that the soul continues to exist after death. The opinion of the majority which Cebes mentioned still stands, that when a man dies his soul is dispersed, and this is the end of its existence. What is to prevent the soul coming to be and being constituted from some other source? Thank you. Simmias? Was it Simmias? Yeah, good job, Simmias. You're thinking. Good job. What is to prevent the soul coming to be and being constituted from some other source, existing before it enters a human body, but then having done so and departed from it, itself dying and being destroyed? You are right, Simmias, said Cebes. Half of what needed proof has been proved, namely that our soul existed before we were born, but further proof is needed that it exists no less after we have died, if the proof is to be complete. It has been proved even now, Simmias and Cebes, said Socrates, if you are ready to combine this argument with the one we agreed on before, that every living thing must come from the dead, of which I have seen no evidence other than appeals to word definitions or something. I don't know. It's weird. If the soul exists before, it must, as it comes to life and birth, come from nowhere else than death. And it could come from ectoplasm. It could come from the incessant tree sperm pollen that is driving me nuts every day right now. Why does it have to come from a dead soul? That hasn't been proven. It's just, at least I missed it. Maybe if they mentioned it, but I don't think that's in here. If the soul exists before, it must, as it comes to life and birth, come from nowhere else than death and being dead. So how could it avoid existing after death, since it must be born again? What you speak of has then even now been proved. However, I think you and Simmias would like to discuss the argument more fully. You seem to have this childish fear that the wind would really dissolve and scatter the soul as it leaves the body, especially if one happens to die in a high wind and not in calm weather. Childish fear. This is the first time I think I've really seen him name call. Interesting. Cebes laughed and said, assuming that we were afraid, Socrates, try to change our minds. Or rather, do not assume that we are afraid, but perhaps there is a child in us who has these fears. Try to persuade him not to fear death like a bogey. I like that response. Good job, CBs. You should, said Socrates, sing a charm over him every day until you have charmed away his fears. Where shall we find a good charmer for these fears, Socrates, he said, now that you are leaving us? Oh, God, that hurts. You don't, oh man. Yeah, just remind the man he's about to get killed. Okay. All right, we're going to leave it there. That's rough. That is rough. Okay. Today's another crazy day for me. And I'm going to be doing some hard work today that is not the normal kind of hard work that I'm used to doing. And so I can honestly see this day going two ways. And it's going to be an awesome day or it's going to be a miserable day. And I really think that my expectations and my attitude about it is going to determine whether this day is awesome or it's miserable. And so I'm going to spend some time real quick before I get started thinking about what the day is going to be like. And I'm going to accept what the day is going to be like, the good stuff and the bad stuff. And then I'm going to make the conscious choice to take both of those things. I'm going to take willfully the hard stuff with the good stuff. And in so doing, I'm going to own it and I'm going to enjoy that hard stuff because I chose it. I could have chosen otherwise, but I chose to tackle it head on, face first, and I'm going to make this a good day. Even the hard stuff is going to improve my day. And you know, sometimes taking on hard stuff actually can make you happier once you win, once you defeat it, once you take it on and survive. That will be today. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great day.